What is going down? You already know what it is. This is another JPL Productions Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be working in Blender 2.91. You can get that for free if you go to the Blender website. And this today, what we're working on to continue our City Pack series is we're working on wrapping a model. So we're going to model this car and we're going to wrap this car. As you can see, we got the dubs on it, the 20-inch rims. Well, whatever size they are, I don't know. But that's what we're gonna make today. It's gonna be pretty cool, and by the time we're finished with this tutorial, you'll actually be able to start doing some pretty good stuff. We didn't really go over UV wrapping in the previous tutorial, so we're gonna do that today, but we're gonna jump straight into this, and I'm gonna start out by modeling this car. So we're just gonna keep it real simple, and I'm just gonna go in here into edit mode with a plane here, just a regular plane, and we're going to go ahead and size this thing to the car that we want. Now you can do this part however you want. You can make your vehicle look however you choose to. I just decided to go with something really simple, really fast. So as you can see, we're just knocking this thing out real fast, sizing this down, and all we're doing here is a series of extrusions and scales and extrusions and scales, and then a little bit of moving with the G key. So if you don't know those keys, those are E for extrusion, S for scale, and G for grab or move. And that's how that works. So it's pretty straightforward. Now we're just modeling this thing here so that it takes a general shape of a car. Of course, the more realistic you want to be, the more time you would put into this. And you know, obviously you probably have some sort of reference. I'm just modeling this straight out of my head, just a general car shape. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add some doors to this thing, and we're gonna eventually cut the wheel wells and all that. And all we're doing, we're not actually adding, we're adding the geometry, but we're not actually adding like the actual physical things of the door. We're just going to focus mostly on the UV wrap here. What I'm doing right here is actually removing some unnecessary geometry. I'm going to fill in these spaces again by selecting all these edges once I've made those disappear, because rather than dissolve the edges that were there, I hit delete. So we're just going to go ahead and fill those back in so they're nice and good to go there now. Bada bing, bada boom. So here we have a general car shape. Now we're going to add a little bit more details and just kind of get some things moving how we want. And you'll see part of the reason that I'm going to do this the way that we're doing it. I want this geometry to be here because it's actually going to provide me the lines for the UV map that will serve as some of the detail in the car. Now this is just doing this in an extremely simple way, just making the car shape, and then we're going to take this into Photoshop, our UV map, and I'll explain to you how to do that. So we're just kind of getting the dimensions here a little bit better, refining it. So this is all stuff you should already be able to do by now if you've been keeping up with the other tutorials that we have. So it's really straightforward. You know, just make this thing look however you want to make it look. You can make a car, truck, whatever. Or you could even make some sort of other object. Here I'm just extruding the geometry here to make some bumpers. And I didn't even add lights like headlights or tail lights to the car. I just kept it super simple, just for the sake of knocking this out quickly. So we're extruding along face normals here, so that way we could get those mirrors. And then what we're going to do is I'm kind of sizing it a little bit, but it doesn't really work how I want. So I end up where I just select those 2 points and I merge them at last. So click, click, and then right click, and then merge at last. And that will make those points become 1 point. So now we just kind of move this around a little bit, kind of get my mirrors right. So it's really, you see, it's really simple, and how quickly we actually modeled this car. Now, mind you, I am moving here a little bit in fast forward because there is, this tutorial is about 30 minutes long or so, maybe a little bit more, and I don't want to make it too long, so I'm kind of fast forwarding some of it. Really, if I just went through this and wasn't examining it and looking at it, you know, if I just built the car, it would probably go much faster, but I wanted to leave room for explanation for some things. So here you see we have a car, and everything's really straightforward, really simple. So I also will be starting Photoshop in a minute, and then once we get the wrap done, but first, before we get to the wrap, there's a key to this to make this successful and make it work easier. So what you'll see that I'm doing here is I'm selecting like the hood of the car right now. I'm selecting the portion that I want to be its own section on the UV map. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to mark seams. So when we mark the seams, what you'll see in our options there is we got mark seam. And when you mark that, what you'll see is that it turns that line red instead of orange, bada bing, bada boom, or a darker orange, I guess. It really looks more red to me. But what happens is when you mark all the seams and then you create the UV map, it will automatically separate those things so that they're flat or they're unwrapped in the way that allows that to be its own piece. Now the reason for that is because whenever we're messing with a UV map or we're editing one, we want to be able to handle an area as detailed as possible if we want to. And in order to do that, each thing will pretty much need itself to be separated. Now, I'm going to tell you, when you are marking seams, as you're marking them, if you have an area that you didn't mark a seam that shares a side or an edge with something that is marked, what will happen is it will keep it connected. It will separate it from the rest of the seamed area, but it will keep it connected along the edge that's not. So as I'm going through here, I'm just going to continue to select these pieces here, right? Select these edges that I want. Okay, right click, mark seam, boom. So now I've got a seam for the trunk. I'm making a seam for the back. Seam, not seam, by the way. Now I'm going to do the doors, right? And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of the car. Okay, set my seam, and boom. There we go. And then do the same thing. Now we are going to select the same edge there for the seam because we want it to separate from there and be two separate components. So now whenever we look at the UV map, you'll see that the doors are individual. They're not actually stuck together. And we want that. So now I've got this whole front quarter panel that we're doing, our fender, and we're going to do the other fender. Boom, boom, perfect. Okay, now we're going to do the mirror, all right? And I did the mirror as a whole because I was okay with those pieces kind of being stuck together. I wanted them to be near each other so that way I didn't, so that I don't get lost in the geometry trying to figure out what's what, which does end up happening to me anyway with some of the larger pieces, but you'll see it's a pretty easy fix. You can actually just go in here, click on the thing you need and see which piece it is if you get confused that way. So now we're doing the rear quarter panels, same thing, do the other side. Okay, and you got to make sure that you don't get geometry that you don't want because it can confuse you in your editing of the UV map. So just make sure that when you're clicking those edges that you're just getting the edges you need. So here's my windshield, boom, get the rear windshield, seams, and it's worth the time that it takes to do this because if you just unwrap this as it is, it may do an okay job, but it's not going to do as detailed a job. So you'll find that editing your UV wrap sufficiently, in other words, editing it in images or portions of images or graphics or whatever you put in there, showing where you want them and how you want them, will not happen as easily. So marking the seams is one of the most important things when it comes to creating a UV map. The most detailed of animations and models that you see will almost always have been UV unwrapped and have those seams have been marked, so that way it will do it how they want. So here we are, we right click, or we go into our UV editing, and you can't see the top of my screen like a dummy when I was recording this. I forgot to size my window appropriately, but anyway, we're in the UV layout and or UV editing window, and what we're doing here is we're looking at the UV map. Okay, so this is our UV map on the left after we've unwrapped it. In order to do that, when you go into this mode, if you go on the right window where the model's at and go to the UV button at the top, it will have a drop down in there, and in that drop down it'll say UV unwrap or smart unwrap or smart UV unwrap, something like that. And you can do either one of those, and once you have the seams marked, it's pretty much going to stick to what you've done. Now it will change the layout a little bit when you do a smart UV unwrap with those seams, but it doesn't really change too much. So we just went with UV unwrap, and as you can see, this is our UV wrap, right? So each one of those shapes is there based on the seam that we marked. And as you can see that the UV wrap, when you unwrap it, it will automatically do its best to fit all of the pieces into this image evenly, or to their actual size anyway, and it will fit everything into this one space, so it's in this one image. So once we have this image, in order for us to now get this image out of here and actually make it a UV wrap we can use, we will need to go to, on our left side, now I just select all here just because it makes me more comfortable to do so, and then I can see that I've gotten everything. But you're going to go to, down here at the bottom, Export UV Layout. Okay, and on another window on my other screen here, you can't see it, it's actually having me save the image in a location. So I'm going to move this over here for you. And so I'm going to go ahead and, move to my location. Boom, and I'm going to call this map, and it's a ping. I'm going to save it in a ping format. So now I open it in Photoshop, and you see here it is in ping format. Everything's transparent. Now you don't have to watch me edit it. Boom, I just went ahead and edited everything and showed you. I just kept things really simple, just colored things. So now what I'm going to tell you real quick is the fastest way for me to do this is I create new layers for each one of those components. I'll use the magic wand tool and just select each one, fill it in, and then do as necessary for each piece. Now once I've got that done, I'm going to come back in here to Blender, and I've got the image saved in the file in the location I want it in. Now down here at my timeline, I'm going to go to Shader Editor, over on the left and down. Boom. Okay, so we're going to click Shader Editor because this is where we apply our nodes at. And in order to have this image wrap or UV wrap apply to this, we need to make sure that we do this in the nodes. So because this is going to be a texture, an image texture. So now I've started a new texture. Okay, so it automatically drops the principal BSDF shader and the output. What we're going to do, and I went ahead and renamed this, just so that way we know what layout we're working with here. And now I'm going to go to Add, and I'm going to add a texture, and I'm going to add an image texture. I know I'm kind of flying through this. Like I said, I try to speed this up so that way it goes pretty quickly. But you can always come back, and my suggestion is come back and watch something if you miss it. It's really straightforward and simple, so I don't think you'll miss too much. So what we're doing here now is we're going to open our image after we've added the image texture. And I'm going to bring this window over here so you can see. I'm going to go to where my image is at, and I'm going to select my UV wrap. Now I called mine, when I saved it in Photoshop, I had to save it as a new name and a new image because I don't want to get rid of the original one in case I decide to make others. So I called it green UV wrap, something like that. I can't remember. It's right there. You see it. So anyway, or green car UV wrap, something like that. Anyway, we're going to select that image, and you see nothing's applied yet. So we're going to take the color dot on our image texture there, and we're going to attach it to the base color on the principal BSDF shader. Now, typically what happens here is you would see the image apply, but it wouldn't be applied necessarily correctly. Now, it didn't do that here, and I'm thinking that's probably a new thing in Blender 2.91. They just make sure that you have all the settings set and all that, and it doesn't automatically apply. So you can see that that UV wrap image is still there, but it's not the image that we created. So what we have to do is we actually have to open the image. So if you'll click on Open on the left side where your UV wrap is at, you'll see directly above it, it has like Image, New Image, Open. So we're going to go to Open, and then we're going to open our image in just a sec. And I'm just looking here for some other options just to make sure I'm not missing anything. But, of course, I didn't miss anything. Everything was right. So now I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to find that image, which is my UV wrap image. Okay, same one. And you see it automatically puts it in place. So you can see that everything's there, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to change our view and see if this works. So in just a second, okay, now we're going to go to our view here, and this is our rendered view, and you see that we're not getting anything. All we're getting is this funky looking deal here where it's just gray. It's not showing us anything. So, I'm looking around, and let's go to our other view, and you can see it's the same thing. So something's not right here that needs to be turned on, or some setting or something. So what we do is I'm going to show you where this is at. Okay, so now when you go to the right, let's go back to UV editing mode or UV layout. We're going to go to the right, and on the right side we're going to go down to our render settings, and in our render settings we have performance. Under performance, click map quality or high quality, whatever that is. I can't really see it. It's tiny on my screen right now for some reason. But anyway, when you click that, you'll see that it automatically applies our UV wrap. And because the UV wrap was designed to the specs of the car with the seams, it automatically applies it appropriately. So as we're moving around here, you'll see a couple of things aren't right. So like my window was green, so I had to go back into Photoshop and just change it. But as quickly as you can go into Photoshop and alter it and save it, you can go back in and reapply it. So it's really fast, really simple. So as you see, we already have the car now. And I'm just messing with my camera here, getting some things straight. And then what we're going to do now is with the wrap, all good to go. And we added a light in here too in our not editing mode, in our object mode, so that way we could see the wrap. So anyway, you can see that we've got us a nice green little car here now. And as simple as it was to make this, it would be even easier to make others, because now if I wanted to duplicate this, I could make different wraps and all of a sudden have a series of different cars. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make the wheels, but first we're going to make the wheel wells. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use this cylinder, add a cylinder in, rotate the cylinder on the X or on the Y axis 90 degrees, and now we've got it perfectly horizontal, and we're going to move it where we need it to be at. And then we're going to actually apply some modifiers to this. First, we're going to get it to the size we need, kind of roughly around the area we want. Now remember, when you're making the wheel well, it needs to be a little bit bigger than the wheels itself. And you know, this is of course, I think according to just realistically how wheels will work, they need space to move, they need space to turn and rotate. So now what we're doing is we're kind of sizing this down to almost where the wheel is at, but we're going to end up sizing it back up. So I'm just kind of getting this about where I generally want it to be at. Now I want it to be a little bit big because, like I said, the wheel well needs to be a little larger. So I'm going to scale this down and just kind of mess with my proportions a bit, and then see about getting this set up right. Now we're going to shift this over, and we're going to just position this first one, because all we need to do is position the first one in the right place, and then we can move the others as we go. So now we see this is a little low, so let's move this up, but it is about the right size we want, and I don't want to go all the way to that edge there. So we're going to go ahead and put this like this. Okay, scale it down just a little bit and then move it up some more because it needs to go up. Move it a little forward. All right. That looks pretty good, and we're going to make this a little deeper so that it actually goes in to the car, because we want it to go in with enough space that the wheel can fit in it. And it looks like it makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to move this over a little bit. It looks like that's all right. Doesn't look bad. Now we're going to apply some modifiers here in just a second. What we're going to do is we're going to add a mirror modifier to this, and we're going to mirror the X and the Y, if I'm not mistaken, or it might be the Y and the Z, I can't remember. Okay, so here's our mirror modifier. Not that one. Doing a whole bunch of moving around stuff here for a sec. Oh, that's right. I was looking for another way here to apply this modifier, but I decided just to go with the typical way that you would do it, which is down there in your modifiers. So we're going to add our mirror modifier now. Boom. And then we're going to mirror the Y and the Z axis. There we go. We're going to mess around with this for a second, make sure we got it right. No, none of these others are doing it, right? So when we go back to the Z on the axis, you'll see that it'll do exactly what we need, and it will automatically duplicate the front and the back because they're already mirrored. So just messing around with it, and boom. Now you see when they pop up, bada bing, bada boom, everything's in place. And I'm sure that you're probably like, wow, that looks a little funky because those wheels are sticking out way big. But remember, these are not the wheels. So what we're going to do is once we have this here, we're going to apply this. And when we apply this, it's going to make this an object. And then what we're going to do, it's going to make it an object with all four of those wheels, right? Boom, see? And then what will happen is we are going to add another modifier. We're going to do a Boolean on this. And we're going to subtract this from the car so that way the wheel wells are there. Now we want to move this in just a little bit more to make it go in a little bit deeper, which would make more sense for the way the wheels would sit inside of the car. And you'll see in just a minute what I'm saying. So now we've got these all in there. They're all in the right places. Looks good. Cool. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add another modifier here, and we're going to add that boolean, and then we're going to select the object we just made with the cylinders. So, boom, and as you can see, it's already subtracted it, and then once we apply it, then it will set those changes in there, and you'll see that once we apply this, and then we get rid of those wheels, or those I guess I don't really know what to call them, the pieces that we're using to subtract. Once we get those out of there, then you'll see something's happened to our UV wrap, and I'll show you that in just a sec. So let's go ahead and hide this after we've applied that. See that? Now you can see that our UV wrap has applied the UV wrap pieces to the new geometry, so it all looks a little funky. And you can see the doors and the windows, and it just doesn't really make sense there. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a quick fix to this, and the easiest way is to go into our editing mode, or our UV wrap mode anyway, UV layout, and we're going to select all that geometry, which when we click in here, it's actually going to be selected already. So we're going to click our UV, boom, and you can see that at the bottom it's already selected. Now I'm not quite sure why it already had it selected, but it worked to our benefit. Now if you look at the UV wrap on the left, you'll see the new geometry pieces in there, and they don't align with anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit A on that side, and we're going to select all of that. And then we're just going to find the color we need, which we're going to do the gray color here that we did on the roof. And we're just going to scale this down. We're not going to change the shape any, because if we ever need to shape it back up, then it's there. But what we're going to do is scale it down and put it right inside of that gray. So now you see it's just gray. Boom. Problem solved. So it didn't even take a lot of work to get that done. Now we have this car here, and look, we're just missing some wheels. Of course, I didn't put headlights on it or anything either. You can do that in your UV wrap, or you can add geometry, or however you want to go about it. In this particular lesson, I think if I were going to do it, I would do it in the UV wrap. So now we've brought this back, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this to scale down and make our wheels. Now, we actually have not applied this yet. So I said apply it earlier, but we didn't apply it yet, and there's a reason for that. We used it as a boolean, but we didn't apply it because when you apply it, it would have made everything that size as it is. And we wanted to keep this as simple as possible, so we actually are just editing the one wheel, and it will automatically edit the other four because we haven't applied that modifier yet. So as I'm sizing this down and everything and getting it to the right shape and size, you'll see the others change too, and then once it's done, then I apply it. So looking at this now, I've already applied it because I have gotten it to the size I want. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do the same thing on the tire that I did on the car to unwrap it. First, I'm going to mark my seams, I'm going to mark the faces, and then I'm going to unwrap the whole thing. Now, actually, I haven't applied this modifier yet. I'm sorry, I keep saying that, but I haven't applied it yet, because what's going to happen here is I'm going to mark this seam, and I'm going to mark the other seam for the other circle on the other side of this wheel. Then, once I apply the wrap to it, after I've finished it, you'll see that it'll automatically apply to all of them because they're being mirrored, and then that's when I apply the modifier. So right now I'm just marking the seams, okay, selecting those faces, marking the seams, boom, so I've got those. Now I'm not going to worry about marking the seams for the horizontal lines that are making, or horizontal faces. And the reason for that is because they will, because of their shape, they'll pretty much unwrap in a very straightforward fashion. They'll stay the same size. They might not be aligned correctly or lined up straight in one way, like one line, which you'll see in a minute. But they stay pretty straightforward in their shape and all that. But we do want to make sure we mark these front seams because we want to know what area we have to work in for the wheels. Okay, so as you can see, I've got everything here pretty selected. Everything's good to go. All the seams are set. It's looking really good. Yeah, just kind of examining a bit. Yep, looks good. And then now we're going to unwrap that. Wrong thing. Let's back out of here and go back into the tire or into the wheel. Okay. Now I'm going to select this and I'm going to unwrap it. Okay, let's go to UV unwrap and just unwrap, or smart unwrap. There we go. Okay. And then now we're going to go to UV layout mode again. Boom. Now you see our new UV map overlays the other one. This didn't really create any issues for me. It was kind of confusing at first, and I'm sure that there's a way to clear it, but I'm just going to go ahead and go straight to this. So I just went ahead and exported it like I did the last one, and it just exported what I needed. There was nothing extra in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into Photoshop, and I'm going to edit that wheel, and I'm going to go into Google and just find a couple of images and see which ones work best. I'm going to find an image for some tread. So here's where what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that, right? And then I'm going to make I'm going to go to that one, okay? Select it, boom. Okay, so you see it's doing this confusing thing where it just overlays it. But anyway, I'm sure somebody more experienced will be like, hey man, this, there's a way to fix that. But what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and export it. Go down to export, and when we export it, it will only export the actual thing we need. So this was our first one, right? And then I'm going to open up the new one. I called it like wheel or car wheel map. There it is. Boom. And you see it just exported that. And now we only have one circular face, even though we marked two seams. And the reason for that is because with them being the exact same shape, it just went ahead and overlaid them. Now, in the instance that you would need something different, or need two individual circles there, for both faces, you would probably approach that a little differently. I would probably have marked the seams for all of these lines we're working with that we're putting the tread in. And as you can see, I'm just going to duplicate this tread that I found online, and then that's good to go. And then I'm going to look for a rim. The key to this here was just finding a straightforward front shot of a rim. Nothing too, too detailed, not too much stuff going on around it, something I could cut out easily. I went with this one first, and I was like, okay, this seems pretty cool. I like this rim, looks good, but it just wasn't quite the angle that I wanted. It's slightly off from front face, like straightforward, and you can see that there's some shadow around it. I move it around a little bit, and it just wasn't quite working how I wanted it to work. So I actually ended up getting rid of this one and going with another one that was a little bit more straightforward. So you see, and I've got some shadow on the bottom, but the thing is when I rotate that, it's not going to look natural. There'll be a shadow moving around it. So I decided, I was like, okay, well, this one here is a good shot, and it's got pretty decent lighting, pretty even, pretty straightforward. It'll still have a similar thing with shadow, but, it's not too big a deal. Much less noticeable. So anyway, so here we go. Now as you can see, there's something behind the rim, so I went ahead in here and I just edited this a little bit to clean it up some, and you can do however you want with your graphics and stuff. Ultimately, the only thing that really matters in this tutorial as far as the UV wrap goes is that what you put inside of the shapes is what's going to show up when you go and apply that UV wrap. So, if there's something in there you don't want, then make sure you take that out. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. You just edit something, put that stuff inside of the spaces you need, and then that's how it goes. So like when you see those super detailed animations that people have, and you're wondering, man, how do they get all that detail in there? They literally went into their UV wrapped or unwrapped images or models, and for each one of those small pieces that they have, they actually applied a UV wrap directly to it. So they can people get extremely detailed going into these things. You can get super microscopic and, hit individual pixels of color and add those kind of details. So when you see skins that look like, like flesh, those probably were taken from photos of flesh. Now, the greatest part about this is we're back in Blender now after we finished our UV map and we saved it. Changed its name. We're applying this the same way we did the first one, except we made a new material, because if you don't, then you'll just be editing the other one. So we make a new material, we apply that to the wheels. Now mind you, we still have not applied the mirror modifier yet, and here's why. Boom, problem solved. We get one thing set up on there, and it applies to all of them. So they're all done now, just like that. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. You create a model, you unwrap the model, or you mark the seams, you unwrap the model, then you apply an image texture through the shader editor, and it will wrap around your object. So now we've got this car here, and it's really straightforward. This could be the beginning of something for a video game. So we got this really cartoony looking car, really straightforward, and then we got some dubs on it, some 20-inch rims. They look like 20s to me. I don't really know if they are 20s or not, but they look like 20s. But they look nice. Now, here's the other cool part that we're working on right now. We're just kind of looking at it, examining it, seeing that all of these are set. And right now, they are all seen as one object. So what we need to do now is, in order to make them rotate individually, we need to separate the objects. So first, we're going to end up applying the modifier. So now, oh, no, actually, if you notice when we're looking around, the wheels, the tread didn't go all the way around the wheels. And the reason for that is because for some reason, part of our UV map, when we unwrapped it, you see that there's more boxes there now, and there's the other circle, the other sphere, or the other circle. For some reason, when we unwrapped it the first time, it didn't unwrap correctly. So what I went ahead and did is I just kept the same image, and all those spaces, rather than unwrap it and then take it back into Photoshop and do it, you can literally just select these, the shapes you need. So watch, we'll click off of this, and then I'll go into the left side over here, and then we'll select the boxes that we need, the faces we need, and shift them to fit how we want. Now this, of course, isn't perfect. If you were trying to do something that looked seamless and perfect, then you would go about this in a much more detailed way, but this is enough to suffice for what we're doing. So now you see we just shifted over, and then we're going to do a little bit of scaling. First, we're going to shift them over, and we're going to do each of these faces by themselves, or as these little groups, because what we don't want to do is change their size too much. We would rather shift these so that they maintain the proportions, as opposed to scale them, because if we scale them, then you might have some tread that looks huge and some tread that looks tiny, and then it ends up not working right. So the way that we're doing this is and when you look at the tire and the pattern, it might not match in some places, but I think for the most part, with something this simple, you probably really wouldn't be too worried about getting the tread to line up perfectly. So just, we're just moving this along, shifting it, and then now you see that it goes all the way around the tire, and you can see the difference that it makes going around the tire. It actually looks more like a tire, right? So it's looking pretty good. So now that we've got that done, now we're back in our object mode, and now we can actually apply the modifier to this. I know I keep saying it over and over. You guys have probably applied it a long time ago. Just, you don't want to do that, though, in order to make this easiest. And I know that was my mistake telling you that. But anyway, if you haven't yet, then you're up to speed with me. So now we've applied this, and what we're going to do is we're going to select each individual wheel now. And the reason for that is because we're going to separate it from the object that it was. So we're going to take this whole wheel, and I'm going to change to my wireframe mode so I can make sure I grab all of the geometry of it. And then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to separate selection, and I'm going to do this for each wheel except for the last one. The last one will stay as this object. So selection, and then we're going to do this other one, and then yep, separate selection. Okay, and now we're already in the object for that one, so we don't need to do it to that one. Okay, so now we're back in our object mode. And you can see we've got 4 individual wheels. We're still in wireframe mode, so let me switch this up a little bit to go back to our other view. Boom. Okay, so now we're back in our object mode. You see we're not in wireframe mode. Now, if I was to rotate this, watch what will happen. It's not rotating around the center. So now what we're going to do is we need to reorient the origin. We're going to set the origin point to center of mass. And the reason for that is so that that way we can actually rotate this on its axis. And we're going to do this for each one of these. So there you go, there you go. And this is at the top, of course, as you can see, it's going to be under Object. And then Set Origin, and then boom. And then last one. Boom. Cool. And we're almost done. This is pretty much it. So now we can rotate this, and when you see that we rotate it, boom, now you got a wheel that rotates along its center. Okay, so that is pretty much it, guys. There's not really much more to this. We have our car wrapped, and now this thing's ready to take into animations and start using. So I hope that you guys learned something from this. It's really straightforward. If you missed anything, make sure you go back. But I really appreciate you guys checking out today's tutorial. So as you see, we've got us a car wrap sitting on dubs, baby, green for the color of money. You know what I'm saying? make sure you guys check out this tutorial, check out the previous tutorials if you haven't. If you haven't, then you probably missed something that will help you make this one a little easier. But as you can see, we got a beautiful car here. And in the next one, I'm actually going to show you how to do a little bit of animation with this. So, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys check out the website, thejplproductions.com, where you can find all of this at. And it's most of it's downloadable for free. So make sure you guys check us out for the next tutorial. We will see you next time.